So one way that JRPGs mentally put players into the shoes of the main protagonists of our favorite games, especially with some older entries, is the fact that the protagonist would be a silent one. While them being silent all of the time might take away from their personality, it also allows us to feel more connected to the character in some cases. And on this episode of Fantasy Kingdom, we'll be taking a look at 7 JRPG protagonists that connected with us on an emotional level despite being mostly silent. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more JRPG content. Also hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Fantasy Kingdom, and this is my top 7 best silent protagonists in JRPGs. Let's get it. Number 7, Mario, Super Mario RPG. Mario may very well be one of the most recognizable characters in all video games, but as a JRPG character, he's not really talked about much in that regard. That's because outside of the Paper Mario series, which ironically started out as a sequel to the game I'm about to mention, Super Mario RPG is really the only true Mario game that qualifies as a traditional turn-based JRPG. In fact, this game was developed by Square Enix, you know, the juggernauts of the JRPG industry. Anyway, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars took the Mario IP and created a unique experience with an original villain, new likable characters like Geno, and created a one-of-a-kind story that kept us hooked from start to finish. However, as with most Mario games, Mario was without a doubt his traditional silent protagonist self. Throughout the story, Mario connected with different characters and communicated with different people through his reactions and emotions. However, because this is Mario we're talking about, obviously he could light up a whole room with nothing but a small sound effect. Clearly that wasn't a problem for this game. Therefore, Mario would go down as one of the best silent protagonists in a JRPG courtesy of his role in Super Mario RPG, which, by the way, has a remake on Switch, and it's absolutely amazing. Number 6, The Hero, Dragon Quest XI, Echoes of the Past. You really could pick and choose which Dragon Quest main protagonist is your favorite to include on this list, as each of them are silent protagonists. However, I think it's fair to narrow it down to the hero in the following games. Dragon Quest III because Erdrick is just so damn iconic. Dragon Quest V because of how the story plays out and how well it implements this silent protagonist role for the main character. And Dragon Quest XI, which is my pick for this spot, mainly just because this game served as my introduction to the series, and it's still to this day one of my favorite modern JRPGs due to the art style, the story, and the innovative gameplay mechanics. Anyway, as I said earlier, the hero in all the Dragon Quest games are unique in the way that they are all silent protagonists. You play as them, well, most of the time you play as them throughout the story, in which you find out it is your destiny to defeat some sort of dark force plaguing the lands. It's your typical JRPG story about a young hero from a small town going on a journey to save the world, but where the hero from Dragon Quest XI stands out to me is their facial expressions that create some emotional situations than previous heroes. Sure, that can be due to Dragon Quest XI being the most modern game of the franchise, but because of this small thing, I'm able to completely understand how the protagonist feels and reacts more than ever before, courtesy of the animation style of Dragon Quest XI. That and the hero of Dragon Quest XI is just an absolute badass, just saying. Number 5, Ludger, Tales of Xillia 2. Not only is Ludger actually a fantastic protagonist in the Tales series, a franchise full of iconic main characters, he's also in my top 5 favorite characters of the franchise. On top of that, he's also the only silent protagonist of the entire series. Yeah, when it comes to the Tales of franchise, most main characters have voices. However, Ludger is a silent protagonist and is this way for a very important reason. Unlike previous entries, Ludger is a protagonist that needs to be shaped by the player's choices and actions. For that reason, he kind of comes off as a blank slate and it becomes a character that you essentially help build. This thought process is used for other silent protagonists in other JRPGs, but for some reason, Ludger feels the most connected to the player compared to those other characters. Plus, it's a nice change of pace for a franchise that primarily uses linear storytelling complete with voiced main characters. Number 4, Joker, Persona 5. Okay, so if we're talking about a silent protagonist that we basically get to shape their personality into whatever we want, then we can't really go on without mentioning the Persona protagonist. While not every main character in this series is a silent protagonist, most of them are, meaning there's a handful of different protagonists to choose from, whether that be Maya in Persona 2, Eternal Punishment, or Yu Narukami in Persona 4. However, since most of them are on par for me in terms of which silent protagonists had the biggest impact on me as a player, I'm gonna go with the one that vibed really well with the colorful casts in their respective games the best. And for me, that was Joker. Joker's swag, stylish persona just meshed really well with the other wild personalities of the Phantom Thieves in Persona 5. His personality even though it was mostly designed by your choices, somehow complemented the rest of the cast in a way that made each character stand out even more, and for a silent protagonist to have that sort of impact on the entire game as a whole, yeah, he definitely deserves a spot on today's list for that alone. He may be a blank canvas, like some other silent protagonists in JRPGs, but he's a badass and cool one at that. One that makes us feel like we're actually that really likable hero in our favorite animes. Come on, anime fans, you know exactly what I mean about that, right? Number 3, Red Pokemon. I didn't realize this until I actually sat down and thought about it, but Pokemon is technically the first ever JRPG that I've ever played. I remember being a kid and getting my hands on a Game Boy and Pokemon Red for the first time, and the rest is history. I played that thing non-stop to the point where I would give multiple Pokemon to level 100. And like many protagonists of the Pokemon franchise, the main character of the first generation of Pokemon, most notably regarded as Red, is easily the most iconic of the series. Maybe it's because of some of the similarities that Red had with the anime's protagonist Ash at the time, but for some reason no Pokemon protagonist has hit the same highs and likability as the original Pokemon master himself. Hell, even when we faced off against him in the second generation, it's such an iconic moment that literally gives me chills every time I think about it. Red may have been a boy few words, but he still remains as one of the most iconic silent protagonists in video game history. Number 2, Adol East Series. So technically, Adol isn't considered a silent protagonist anymore thanks to later games introducing a voice for the character, but the fact remains that for the longest time, Adol was a silent protagonist, and not only that, he's arguably the silent protagonist that we've spent the most time with throughout various games. I mean, the first 7 mainline games, Adol was a silent protagonist, and it wasn't until the remake of the 4th game and onwards that he was finally given a voice. Meaning we went over 2 decades with Adol as a silent protagonist throughout his many journeys. If you've never played a Ys game, the series follows Adol on different adventures that he goes on. Each game retells one of his great adventures. Even though he's a silent protagonist though, we do get some expressions and sound effects from his character, most notably during combat. However, in some games, like the Oath of Felghana, Adol may say a line or two here and there to add some personality. Still, Adol is widely regarded as a silent protagonist, and some fans, me not being one of them, are actually upset that he now has a voice in recent entries of the Ys franchise. I guess his silent persona really made an impact on some fans of the series, didn't it? Anyways, before we get to the number 1 entry though, I want to take a quick moment to give a shout out to a few more silent protagonists in JRPGs that just barely missed out on the top 7.
So the Fellstar consumes even the darkness itself.
Number 1, Chrono Trigger. When I think about a silent protagonist that's connected with me on an emotional level the most, the first one that comes to mind is Chrono and Chrono Trigger. Sometimes when thinking about Chrono, I actually forget that he was actually a silent protagonist. That right there speaks volume of how well he connects with the player, and even to this day, Chrono is regarded as one of the best protagonists ever in a JRPG. That's how impactful he was despite not saying a single word. Sure, there are definitely some awkward moments throughout the story when Chrono doesn't speak back to a character, but they immediately respond to him as if he did. However, for the most part, his personality comes out stronger than most protagonists in JRPGs, which is why he's largely viewed as one of the best characters in the genre. His sacrifice moment, the anime full motion cutscenes, all of it, Chrono stands out as someone that finds a way to connect with each character in this extremely incredible JRPG without saying a single word. That's impressive right there, and for that reason, he's my pick for best silent protagonist in a JRPG. But that does it for this episode of Fantasy Kingdom. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is Chrono the best silent protagonist in a JRPG, or is there a different character that you think deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more JRPG content. Also, leave a like in today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Fantasy Kingdom. Take care.